Welcome to our session today. I'm Ingrid Nietzsche, the Regional Rotary Foundation Coordinator for Zone 28. And on behalf of myself and my colleague, Joanne Ventura, who's the coordinator for Zone 32, and our foundation teams, we extend a very warm welcome to each one of you today. We had a super session yesterday, and I want to thank all of our district and club leaders who are on the call, and particularly those who are on the call for the third session. Special thanks to you for sure. I wanted to mention that our assistant coordinators who have been on the calls and who are available to help you with any of the foundation matters that we've discussed these last two sessions. So please keep that in mind. Those of you who are in Zone 28, you get the list of the assistants every time you receive one of my communications. And I know that all the assistant coordinators are listed on the Zone 2832 website if you don't know exactly where to find them. I gave Steve's full introduction on our first session, and I wanted to just reiterate how valuable his participation and his sharing his knowledge is for all of us here. Some of you may remember that he has worked and served in Japan for many years, and also works with zones 8, 2, 3, and of course Zone 32 in the USA. But he has traveled extensively and he has lots of experience that he's able to share with us, and we certainly appreciate it. Today, Steve has a special guest, Christian Prepera. Steve and Christian are going to share us some information about grant reporting to help us stay ahead of the curve. And you know, it's always interesting to see those reports that come forward from the Stewardship Department. Joanne and I each get a copy, and I keep track of the districts that are 100% compliance. And congratulations to all of those. But I know that some of our other districts have challenges. And today I think we're going to address some of those reasons that come up. Some of them are quite unique, actually. I wanted to just say a few words before we get started about Christian. Christian is our stewardship manager, and he is responsible for the oversight and monitoring of Rotary's grants programs. I believe he's been with Rotary International for about 17 years, and the last 4 spent as stewardship manager. He develops and implements guidelines and policies to ensure compliance with grant terms and conditions. He also is responsible for grant administration, financial administration, the grant reporting, and any conflicts of interest that arise. He designs curriculum and training materials to prepare grant applicants to effectively manage and implement their grants. He is the steward liaison with the Board of Trustees. And on another note that I noticed is he's quite a cycling fan. So he may want to tell us about that at some point in time. Anyway, I'd like to just extend a special warm welcome to Steve and Christian, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I appreciate you start off these meetings so nicely, and of course the warm welcome to my colleague Christian. So I'll be introducing him partway through this meeting, along with another colleague, Brenda Rodriguez. We're going to split this up into 2 parts again. So let me share my screen, and you will see today that we are covering Rotary grants, reporting, and stewardship. And so I already got a very nice introduction the past 2 nights and today, but I wanted to just make sure that everybody knows who's who in the grants team for your zones. And we have Renee Reiling, who works with most of Zone 28, as well as some other districts in the US, the Caribbean as well. She's been with Rotary since 1997. So we have a lot of, actually, a number of us have been with the foundation for a while. Cecilia Walter is another regional grants officer. She's been with the foundation since 2013, and she works with parts of Zone 28 and 32, as well as many districts in the Philippines and Japan. And then our payment coordinator, and I haven't included her picture before, but she's been with the foundation since 2020. And I want you to know who she is, because she is handling payments. And if you're getting emails from somebody named Grace Walquist at rotary.org, that is legitimate. We don't want anybody falling to fraudulent emails, but this is who you should be communicating with anything on grants payments. when it comes to your zones. So, okay, so for the first half here, I'm going to cover the first half, and then the stewardship team is going to cover the second half. We're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the reporting cycle, what it means to have an overdue or an incomplete report, some of the common issues, and then what you can do. And then we're going to pause for a few questions. I'm going to try to keep my question portion short because I want to leave a longer portion for questions at the end. We'll go to the second half and I'll introduce Christian. He's going to talk about the things that you see on your screen there. Stewardship and what that means for you, including qualification, some of the sponsor relationships that are involved in grants, some of the conflicts of interest, the world reporting that Ingrid talked about earlier, and then the use of the cadre. So let's get to it here. In my first slide, you'll remember that reporting phase if you were in the meeting yesterday. That's what we're going to focus on today. And the first box there in the middle that you'll see, I just have on their email, right? And I wanted to point this out. This is actually a question that came up on Tuesday night, was about what happens if one club is working with another club, or there's some change, actually. I think I misunderstood the question on Tuesday night, is for a new activity or scope change, you would contact your regional grants officer like myself about those changes so that we can review them and approve them for you, and then make a note in the grant record. If you've gotten an email from me about that, it's make a note in the grant record so that when we do get your report, we understand that there's been a change and we can help you integrate those changes. That's for district grants and global grants, actually. But in the grant center itself is where you need to submit the reports. I know that Christian will go over this too, but once payment is made, a report is expected within 12 months. Then within 12 months of acceptance of that report, another report. And then finally, within 2 months of completion of the project. So just to touch on district grants again, district grants is one single report. You include new spending in the report section of that, and we move it into your spending plan, and you're just reporting on disbursement of funds after the district disperses funds to the clubs. For global grants, what I have listed here, those four bullets, are what you'll find in the terms and conditions for global grants, that a report must contain information about the goals and objectives that have been achieved and your measures, the sustainability of the project, the participation of members of Rotarians, and then it must include bank statements. It has an expense log built into it, and receipts. We require receipts for $75 and over. All those things are what the regional grants officer is looking for. So who needs to authorize these? I know that's kind of the main topic that I'm going to tackle in my time tonight. Before we get to the reports, a very important authorization that we've already talked about, but when in the application stage, the district designated funds, those need to be authorized by the district governor and the district Rotary Foundation chair. What I will say, just as a kind of a general warning, we've seen people from time to time select cash from district. This is an option. You won't be able to authorize cash in the system. It has to be district designated funds. So the district Rotary Foundation chair, you are going to authorize any application that your district is included as a sponsor. You might just want to know if you've given district designated funds or not. Is that recorded properly in the funding? But let's move on back to the reports here. So when reports are in draft status, that's when you're building up your report. Once everything is in there and it's completed, it must be locked by the primary contact. That's sort of, in a way, it's the first step towards authorization and completing your report. Only the primary contact from either sponsor is able to lock the report. Once they do that, it triggers an email out to everybody according to the email that you use to sign into my road. And then everybody will be asked to authorize. During the authorization period, anybody who is authorizing can unlock the report. The reason for this is if there's a revision that needs to be made, the primary contact can unlock it, or a district Rotary Foundation chair can unlock it. For example, the club president could unlock it and request edits or make edits themselves. So that's something to be aware of. Regional grants officers can do this for you, but sometimes that takes an extra day or two to get an email to us and have us do that. Just know that you can do it yourselves. And then to actually submit the report, make note that scholars do have to authorize the scholarship section first before the report can be locked as complete. Vocational training teams, if the VTT leader does need to certify that the training has happened, and then the report can be locked and everyone can authorize. For all global grants, including humanitarian grants, both sponsors are responsible as follows. So both primary contacts need to authorize. If it's club sponsored, the current president. If it's district sponsored, the current district Rotary Foundation chair. So as this did come up yesterday, if you're on the call, if you change the Rotary year, the president, for example, that authorized originally for the application is probably going to change. It's going to be a different person. So when a report becomes overdue or complete, what does that mean? Well, first of all, I just have some notes there. When you're in the grant center, we have two sections. One is sorry, my grants. I have my Rotary written there. It should be check my grants, that section. That's going to list, my grants is going to list all of the applications that your district or your club is involved in. You'll also see the district grant there. And then my actions is a more truncated list that should focus on what you need to do. So those are how those are used. And that's usually, my actions is helpful for when you need to make an authorization. Overdue report dates turn red. That's a good way to identify those. And then make sure that you're clicking not on the grant number, but on report, which is on the right side of the screen. It's actually kind of easy to miss that, or if you're not used to it. But once you click into report, then you'll find the report. So, but what does it mean when a report is overdue? It means that there's either no report past the due date, or it's still in draft status, or it's in authorizations required status. If it's in those status and it's past the due date, it's considered overdue. Once a report is submitted, the system assumes that it's complete in a sense until it's reviewed by a regional grants officer. And at that point, if you run a report, you will not see a next report due date shown in a report. So that usually means that it's submitted and pending review. If the report is incomplete, that usually means that there's missing information and it's treated the same as if it were overdue. So that's something to be aware of. And then lastly, a little note here, if you are co-sponsoring a grant with India, they have their own reporting requirements. So this is based on local law in India. So they require reports by May 31st of every year, pretty much for all of their grants. If you have a grant that's approved and paid in January, a report is going to be due on May 31st. They all require something called a utilization certificate, and all bills, invoices, and receipts. They really collect and require a lot of paperwork for these. So just be aware of that different reporting schedule. And then Brazil also has some additional requirements for based on their local law, and something called a donation certificate must be attached to their reports. So that's a little something extra for you to be aware of when you're co-sponsoring with those places. So what are the common issues? Well, first of all, these types of issues, when a report goes overdue, they do seem to affect both the host and international sponsors. When I'm talking to my colleagues at the foundation, those who tend to work more with host sponsors or tend to work more with international sponsors, always, oh, it's, you know, the other sponsor. So yes, it's always the other sponsor, right? But I just want to acknowledge that, yes, this takes member time and attention, and that can cause a lot of frustration. It also can take staff time and attention, maybe frustration, but it can slow down the review an application or something else. So yes, this is an important issue in a lot of ways that we need to stay on top of. So when a report is overdue, why? Is it because somebody has ghosted the project and they're on an extended vacation? That's usually the first thing that we're wondering is like, what's happened to this person? Where did they go, right? I think this came up earlier. So we need to start to explore the reasons that somebody's not responding to us. One of those reasons, a common reason would be that there's been a change in membership, right? So I'm just going to outline here some of the reasons that we've seen. Maybe a primary contact is no longer a member, right? Maybe they were a member, but for personal reasons or any other reason, they're not a member anymore, and that hasn't gotten reported up the chain for a change to be made. That's why we do have the 2 secondary contacts to try to make that easier, but it can be a bottleneck sometimes. The club president, of course, the president will change, so there could be a membership change there. And then the VTT leader, if they are a Rotarian, maybe they have ceased to be a member, but they should still be able to access the application. But there can be membership changes like this that affect authorizations. Then we have the non-member authorizations. The scholar, did they already graduate and you're trying to submit a final report and they included an email address that they're not checking anymore? And again, it could be a VTT leader since they do have to certify the reports. So these are the things that we're trying to figure out. Is it a faulty email address? Is it because the person is on vacation? Is it because the person is indisposed in some way? And we need to uncover what that is. Another reason is they don't have a My Rotary account. This is probably, I'm sure a lot of people on this call have run into this reason. This tends to be because a club president has moved into their role after an application was approved, and now they have to approve and authorize the report, but they don't have a My Rotary account. And that's the only way to get into the authorization section. So we'll often have to support them in getting a My Rotary account. Another reason, however, that's related to this is sometimes people have multiple My Rotary accounts. This can happen when they have one My Rotary account that's associated with their membership, as say the club president, and another My Rotary account associated with the grant itself. And so they are listed in the grant, but they can't access the grant. They can't access the report. This usually involves our data correction department. Staff can help, but you can also email data corrections at rotary.org and get those accounts to be merged under that person's membership account so that we can move forward. These are some of the technical issues that come up. And then, of course, for some reason, they cannot access the grant center. This is another common one. And I acknowledge that there's very little that a district officer can do in some of these cases. You need to reach out to the foundation. We will try to help you resolve these things. I know my colleagues in data corrections, and they work day and night on just so many requests. I don't even know the number. It's probably thousands. For incomplete reports, we also have some common issues for these. That tends to be, this is a very common one, is having missing bank statements or not all of the bank statements for a reporting period, right? We need to see the foundation funds going into that bank account. It needs to be the account that's associated with the global grant all the way through the end of that reporting period, or if it's a final report, through till the grant funds have been spent. If those are missing, we cannot accept the report and it will be incomplete. Sometimes there's missing expenses and we can't match up what's in the expense log that's built into the report and what's showing in the bank statements, and we need to ask questions. If sponsors include a ledger and attach it, there's a supporting document section that often helps us to make sense of things, but sometimes we need to mark it incomplete and reach out and say, we need to make sense of what we're seeing here and receive a ledger. Description of training can be another reason if we don't receive information about important training that's often related to sustainability of a project. We'll need to request that. It would be incomplete. And then if you're not reporting on your measures, especially for a final report. And then some grants do have closure contingencies. These are often communicated in the approval letter. If there's some reason that we're going to request some piece of information, and until we get that, we can't close the grant. Now the big question is what to do about it, right? Most important thing is for sponsors to maintain a relationship. I think Stewardship is going to talk about that a little bit later too. But after approval, what is the relationship? If you can, as district officers or whoever's on the call, if you can encourage quarterly meetings or reports, I mean, think about it. After an application is approved, you might have one meeting and then another one, and then a report is going to be due. So it quarterly might seem frequent, but when you're reporting every 12 months, it can come up pretty quickly. So maintaining a relationship. But the first thing that I'll point out is investigating with counterparts. This is kind of the first step of what to do. So this usually happens in this order. If it's two clubs that are sponsoring a grant, they're going to reach out to each other, but they're not connecting for some reason, then we usually recommend start copying on district officers, right? Maybe it's primary contact to primary contact, add the District Rotary Foundation chair or something like that to make sure that everybody's communicating. Maybe it's the club president should be copied on there. Make sure that the people that need to be on the email are on there and keep that correspondence. At some point, we may have to ask our wonderful regional Rotary Foundation chairs to give us a hand too. I can see Ingrid smiling. This is usually when things have really excelled to, we don't know what to do. And we need more hands on deck. But essentially what to do, send the foundation correspondence. So try to keep that correspondence, show us what you've done. So this is helpful for me so that I can start to compare records and see, are we using the wrong email address, or do I see a termination for the primary contact and nobody has updated us? But the more information that you can forward us, then the faster we can usually resolve it. So you get a gold star if you can tell us the cause. That's basically the message here. If you involve us right away, yes, we can help. But again, back to what I said earlier, it can just slow down a lot of things. So any legwork that you can do and send it to us, it'll help us get to the solution faster. If there is a change in committee members because the primary contact is no longer available, that is something that the regional grants officer who is assigned to the grant will have to do for you. We do require some kind of evidence for the new primary contact, for example, and the previous primary contact, ideally, to be copied on there. So we know everybody's on the same page. The club president, have everybody on an email saying, yes, I'm the new primary contact. Of course, if the old primary contact is not available anymore, the club president. And then we can usually say, okay, everybody's on the same page about this, and the regional grants officer can make the change. If there is a termination or suspension, again, Stewardship will probably talk about this, but I just want to note that sponsorship does shift to the district, but talk to us. The regional grants officer will make this change in the grant record. By default, it's the District Rotary Foundation chair that's going to be assumed to be the primary contact. But I've seen plenty of cases where maybe there was a district merger, a club no longer exists, the primary contact is moving to a different club. If that's the case, of course, we'll move it over to the new club if their president agrees to be the sponsor. So there's a lot of cases like that as well. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. I'll have 5 minutes for questions on what I presented, and then I'm going to introduce you to the really big guns.
We
So you
do have
should
a
be able
couple.
to unmute yourselves. And Sandy, if there's anything in the chat,
Yeah,
thank you.
we do have two questions.
Great.
The one is from Patricia. If we indicate in the grant application that we'll be monitoring and collecting data every 6 months, do we report the data everywhere, or do we simply report the data at the 12-month and 24-month data?
So I'm I might benefit from a little bit of clarification on this, but let me try to answer. We only require reports within 12 months. If you're at a good point of reporting, and you want to do an earlier report at the 6 month point, for example, we'll review that, and then you'll be reset for another 12 months. Again, if you were to collect the data and submit a report within 6 months, you can actually, I would love for that to happen. I'd like to hear from sponsors more often than not. Some people do email from time to time, and that's fine too. For me, I don't mind getting some updates from sponsors by email, but eventually it has to go into the grant center for it to be recognized. I hope that answers the question.
The next question, he gave some background, but the main part of the question is, how long can we delay the approval of a final report?
Well, a final report is due within 2 months of the completion of the project. I don't know in terms of delaying what the reason would be. If it's collecting information, we assume that 2 months is sufficient to collect on measures and whatnot. I would encourage you to submit a final report and make note of what you've collected, what you're submitting, and communicate with us on that, preferably in the report rather than trying to delay. Because there's not a whole lot we can do to accommodate full-on delays, and you'll be at risk of being overdue or incomplete.
And another question, how does an overdue report affect the club and district status with doing further global grant project approvals?
Yeah, this is also something stewardship may speak on, but if you're overdue on a report, if you're a club, you're not eligible to receive any new grants. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't receive a district grant because you have an overdue global grant. That's up to you and your district. But if you're a district sponsoring a global grant directly, that does put your entire district grant at risk if you're overdue on a report. So be very careful when you're sponsoring at the district level.
The last question I have is, can you describe training? What level of detail do you want, Steve?
Did you say for training?
For training, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's usually corresponding to what was in the application itself. We should have a good understanding of what goals you're trying to achieve and the measures. The measures that you'll see in the report are pretty rudimentary in my opinion, like the number of people who were trained and things like that. But if you can provide some additional information about what was achieved, especially behavior, what we're really looking for in that training is what are the behaviors that were changed that are going to allow sustainability of these outcomes, right? And the impact. So you can't really report on impact in a lot of these final reports, but what is the outcome of the trainings? It doesn't have to be super detailed, but we would like to know who actually attended, what are the expectations for the future, how they're going to put this information to use and whatnot, so that we know that the results are sustainable. That's sort of the crux of it.
You're ready to go on from there, Steve.
All right. Hey, everybody's really good on timing tonight. I guess the third time's the charm. We're right at about 5 minutes and at the half hour. So I'm very happy to go to, yes, I'm still sharing my screen. I'm going to pass this over to my colleagues, Christian Papera and Brenda Rodriguez from Stewardship. I will stop sharing so that they can start sharing.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you to Ingrid for that very warm welcome at the outset. I'm gonna guess that the reference to cycling was referring to my participation in the Miles to End Polio race, and that takes place in I forgot the district, 55,000 something in Arizona. But I did have the pleasure to participate in that about probably almost 10 years ago now, with General Secretary John Hugo amongst some other senior leaders. It's a 100-mile bike race in just outside of Tucson.
Well,
Very big
was,
polio fundraiser.
wasn't there another time you cycled 700 kilometers?
That's possible. I actually haven't been riding very much lately. And I miss it. I have two, that was before I had children, and now I've got two young
Oh,
boys,
life
and
changes.
they take a lot of my time. But but no, I'm very happy to join you all again to talk about stewardship, which is a very important topic. I also have my colleague Brenda Rodriguez on the call. If Brenda wants to say hello.
Hi, everyone. So good to join you tonight for this training. And thanks for the invite for having us over to talk about stewardship.
Thanks, Brenda. Brenda's a auditing and monitoring specialist on the stewardship team, and her territory is essentially all of the Americas and Europe and Africa. So anytime there's an issue that gets elevated up to the stewardship department, it's likely that Brenda is going to be one of the first people to review it. And she also helps out with district qualification. So we're happy to have her on the call as well. I want to start with what stewardship means to the Rotary Foundation, because this term amongst various nonprofits means different things. You often hear this term associated with fundraising and donor relations, but for the foundation, it's specific to the oversight and safeguarding of the donor contributions that fund Rotary grants. And kind of starting out my presentation with some of the what's, the whens, the hows of what stewardship is in the grants context. When it's achieved, it means that our grant funds are used in a responsible and transparent manner, and that our projects that grants fund are implemented in accordance with the foundation's code of policies and the grant's terms and conditions. And there are various ways that Rotary ensures that stewardship takes place. We have a committee from the Board of Trustees that is focused on stewardship. Ingrid mentioned during her introduction of me that I am the liaison to that committee. And then we also have a department that has dedicated staff in Evanston as well as in the Delhi office in India to ensuring that our various stewardship processes are taking place. And that really starts with the qualification process, which I'll talk a little bit about tonight. But we also are responsible for ensuring reporting compliance. We oversee the foundation's cadre of technical advisors. And then in the event that there are concerns of misuse of Rotary funds, we also lead investigations and audits into grants when there are those problems. So why is stewardship important? There's a variety of reasons. One, it provides financial accountability to a project. And when you have solid financial management of a grant, your project is more likely to succeed. So that's very important. We want all of our projects to have meaningful impacts on the communities that we're trying to serve. It's very helpful to maintain donor confidence when we don't have large amounts of money being misused or wasted. And it also helps to protect our foundation's organizational reputation. So I'm sure many of you on the call are familiar with Charity Navigator. The foundation is consistently getting 4 stars, which is the highest rating you can get. And the stewardship measures that we have in place really do help to ensure that we get that recognition each year. So I want to talk, I know there's some regional and also district leaders on this call, and I want to talk a little bit about how you all help to ensure stewardship in your various responsibilities as district officers and regional officers. Specifically, when we're talking about grants, district governors, DRFCs, district grant subcommittee chairs, and district stewardship subcommittee chairs are the roles that have responsibilities directly tied to the oversight of qualification and of managing grants that are approved to take place with a sponsoring club or the district itself. But I put on this slide just some of the ways that these various positions do have a role that relates directly to grants and stewardship, managing the district and club qualification process, providing learning opportunities to clubs. That's typically through the grant management seminar, the review and authorization of grant applications, monitoring of grants that have been approved by the foundation, and then the making sure that the reports for those approved grants are coming in on a timely basis. So district qualification is an annual process, and it is required in order for a district and its member clubs to participate in Rotary grants. It's essentially what the qualification process is at the district level is that the district officers, governor, governor-elect, and the foundation chair are agreeing to implement the financial and stewardship requirements that the foundation has in order to participate in grants. And those are all outlined in a document called the District Memorandum of Understanding. In addition to authorizing the District Memorandum of Understanding, there is a new requirement, and I think Steve touched on this earlier in the week, but just wanted to reiterate it because it is new. And it is not something that I would wait. If you are a DRC, I would not wait until June 29th to do it, or June 30th. I would try and get it done as soon as you can. There's a series of courses in Rotary's Learning Center that you are required to complete prior to 1 July. This is a requirement for all DRCs. It doesn't matter if you are continuing your term or if you are starting new on 1 July. Every district and every DRC is going to be required to do this. And if 1 July comes and the DRC has not completed the courses, this essentially means that the district will not be qualified to participate in grants until those courses are complete. So again, it's February 6th. Got 4 months to do this. I would start now and take your time so that you're not rushing at the end of the Rotary year to try and get this done. The District Memorandum of Understanding has 9 sections. There's also a Memorandum of Understanding for club qualification. That one has 7 sections. And I'm not going to go into details on each of the sections, but I did want to highlight 2 of them that I think are very important. One being the financial management plan and the method for reporting and resolving misuse of grant funds. So the financial management plan is something that we see when we're reviewing stewardship issues, that both clubs and districts are required to have one. We find often that this is not the case, that districts and clubs do not have a written financial management in place that is being used on a year-to-year basis. So you can find more information about financial management plans and stewardship plans. I'm going to provide some resources during this presentation where you can learn more about that. But that really is a critical document that guides the financial management of grants for a club and a district and ensures that you're following your own procedures. So, and it's really important for during leadership transitions year to year to make sure that the club's following the same policies and they're not just doing something different with each new club president or each new district governor. And then the other requirement I wanted to touch on here was the method for reporting and resolving misuse of grant funds. Both clubs and districts are required to have a process in place. And it's very important that if there are any concerns at all, that process is followed and that the foundation is notified. And typically you could notify your regional grant officer. You can come right to the stewardship department if there were any concerns. But important thing is that we want to learn of them early so that they can be mitigated as quickly as possible. One of the requirements for a district to become qualified is that they in turn need to qualify all of their member clubs. They don't need to, I shouldn't say they need to qualify all of their member clubs, but they need to provide an opportunity for all of their member clubs to become qualified. A club, if they are not interested in participating in grants, doesn't need to be qualified. But um, there are two minimum requirements for a club to become qualified, and that qualification is necessary. Not to, from a foundation perspective, is not necessary for a club to get district grant funds, but it is necessary to serve as a sponsor of a global grant or to participate in a program of scale. There was one other that I'm blanking on, but um, the requirements are for at least one member of the club to attend the district's grant management seminar, and for the club president and president-elect to authorize the club district or the club memorandum of understanding. Those are the two basic requirements from the foundation's perspective. However, districts have the option of adding on additional requirements. So a district could say, in order for you to get district grant funds, you need to be qualified. Or the district could say, we want club presidents or we want multiple members to attend the grant management seminar. Districts are free to make their own additional requirements as long as they are attainable. And I did want to touch on the contribution piece because this question comes up frequently and it is a little confusing. Districts cannot tie contributions to TRF to their qualification of clubs. However, they can require contributions to TRF as a condition to receive DDF. That is something that is a little tricky. So if you have any questions, we can talk that through further, but I did just want to mention that exception. Steve talked a little bit about this, and I wanted to go into a little bit more detail. Once your club or district is qualified and you're going to start participating in grants, in particular in global grants, finding a partner and maintaining a healthy relationship with that partner is really critical to having a successful global grant experience. I cannot express the number of problems that come to the stewardship department's attention are almost all based in communication failures, one way or the other. Failures of sponsors to communicate with one another, failure of sponsors to communicate effectively with their partner organizations, with the community that's involved. It almost always comes down to communication failure. So building a partnership from the outset that's built on trust and mutual shared objectives of the project. And I think that's where the MOU, not the district qualification MOU, but the MOU that's specific to your project, that's typically signed by the host sponsor, the international sponsor, and then any other partner organizations that you might be working with. That's really an opportunity to outline exactly who's responsible for what and to avoid confusion down the line as you're implementing these grants, which often take years to implement. So it's important to have that kind of guiding principle to reflect back on 16 months, 20 months into a project. Who's supposed to be doing the monitoring and evaluation of this grant? And you actually have a document that shows you. We get a lot of questions of how do I find partners or how do I find good partners? I always say the first person you should ask if you're looking to work in a specific district, to check with that district's DRFC. They will be able to tell you whether or not that club is qualified. They should be able to tell you that club's grant history. Another good person to talk to is the RGO. So every district has an RGO assigned to them for projects taking place in that district. And the RGO can tell you whether or not that particular club has sponsored a grant before, can tell you if the club has any overdue grants. Stewardship staff could tell you this information as well. But even you might be able to talk to a past partner of the club that you're thinking about partnering with. But building up a relationship with them is critical. You're entering a relationship again. These global grants are typically not short. They're not. Most take a year or at least a year or two to complete. So you want to have someone that you trust and that you enjoy working with. So I can't stress enough how important it is to really um, be focused at the outset when you are planning the project to make sure that you're working with a partner and building a strong relationship. Steve talked about some grant reporting issues, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some grant implementation problems. These on this, I'm not going to go into all these in detail, but you can see from this list here on the slide, these are some of the things that we frequently see when problems have occurred in a grant. One of the things, I already talked about communication, but one of the things is Rotarian or Rotary member participation. And this can come up in a variety of ways, but there is a grant committee for a reason. We expect that multiple members of each club involved in a grant are going to participate. When there's just one individual who's doing everything, it really is a risky proposition for a variety of reasons. One, it reduces the transparency and oversight, but also if there was something were to happen to that individual, they leave Rotary, they get sick, something occurs where they're unable to carry out their role in leading the project, it really puts the project and the clubs at a disadvantage, especially if the other members of the committee are just committee members on paper and they're not actually involved. They're going to have a hard time getting up to speed and carrying out the project. We see when grants become severely overdue on reporting, people have left the club, no one knows what's going on with the project. These are the positions you don't want to put yourself in. So making sure that you have an active grant committee that's actually providing updates to your club every time your club meets. You should get some sort of little update on what's going on with that global grant, so that everyone in the club is aware to some degree, and that you're not caught off guard when there are problems that arise. And then the other things we see often are financial management problems, or record keeping. If you were to get audited, the expectation is that you would be able to provide invoices, receipts for all of the grant related purchases. We often find that that's not the case when a grant actually receives an audit. And conflicts of interest, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail right now. And I'm going to move a little faster because I realize I only have 10 minutes left. So I do want to leave time for questions. Trying to bite off more than I can chew here. Conflicts of interest is very important, and it is something that we see relatively frequently, and they're not a bad thing. I want to just say Rotary members have a ton of connections, and they're very helpful in order to get grants planned and implemented. The important thing from the foundation's perspective is that we are aware that those connections exist. And the connections I'm talking about, Rotary members often are on the boards of various NGOs or local organizations, charities, and that's great. And we lean on those other organizations to do our work. But what we need to avoid is when a member is leading a grant and they're in that position to influence the grant that would also benefit some other entity that they're involved with. So we're always looking to mitigate any conflicts of interest before a grant's approved. This also is an issue with Rotarian-owned businesses that might serve as vendors. It's totally allowable if a Rotarian-owned business is providing a service that is a service or a product that is good value to a project, but we would want evidence that there's been a competitive bidding process, not that the contract was awarded to a Rotarian-owned business just because they're Rotarian. So if there are any questions about the conflict of interest policy, it's outlined very clearly, I think, in the Code of Policies. It's also Section 10 in the terms and conditions. But if you ever have any questions, it's always best to err on the side of caution and just disclose any potential connection. And that's beyond just the grant committee. In the application now, we ask if there's any connections with any club members, and I think even district leaders with any of the organizations that are involved in the grant. So just to be aware of that. And if you do have questions, to flag them for staff. Grant management seminar. This is just a great opportunity for districts to share all of this type of information with the clubs. I won't go into too much more on that right now because I do want to talk quickly about the consequences of reporting if you are overdue. Steve went over when reports are due. Our department will send reminder letters when you're at 18 months, 24 months, or 30 months after payment or after a previous accepted report. If we don't have an accepted report, 30 months have elapsed, your club or district is at risk of being suspended from participation in Rotary grants. And that's the biggest consequence. And for a club, it means a 2-year suspension. For a district, it means the district and all member clubs are suspended until that report is accepted, and then the suspension would be reversed. But as Steve mentioned, new applications can't be approved if you have an overdue report, and then it also negatively impacts your reporting percentage. And we do look at reporting percentages for every district every quarter. And this graph you see here, the expectation from the trustees is that every district be at least 70% compliance. You can see 3 colored lines there. The global percentages going back to July of 2023 is the blue line. And then zones 28 and zone 32 are the orange and black lines. So you can see that you're doing very well when it comes to reporting. You're above the global average. In fact, there were 6 districts last year that received or should have received a letter from the chair of the foundation thanking you for excellence in grant reporting because you got over 90% in all 4 quarters. So you can see the 6 districts listed there on the slide. And then in the last 2 minutes, I'm going to talk very, very quickly about the cadre. This is an incredible resource of volunteer Rotary members who have professional backgrounds and expertise in our areas of focus, as well as financial auditing. There are over 500 of them located in 75 countries around the world. They're available to help plan projects, and then the foundation also uses them to evaluate our larger grants. So usually those that get 50,000 or more from the World Fund, and to audit those grants as well. We do random audits and what we call targeted audits whenever there is a concern of misuse of funds. You can see on this slide just some of the examples of the professions that we have within the cadre. I'm going to just skip ahead here, but these are some of the things that cadre members can help with. They're essentially a free consulting resource that's available to any club or district. They can help with things like planning community assessments, building monitoring and evaluation plans for your project, and just providing that technical expertise since they do have those professional backgrounds. I'm going quickly here because I know I'm cognizant of the time, but we do have in these 2 zones 14 cadre members, including the chair of the cadre, Carolyn Johnson. She's out of District 7780 in Maine, and out of those 14 members, they actually cover all 7 areas of focus as well as financial auditing. So these are some of the resources. I did want to just briefly mention on our qualification page at My Rotary, you can find both district and club stewardship planning guides. We're currently in the process of making these into like a template or like a fillable form to make those guides more accessible to clubs and districts. But I think those are really helpful. You'll also find the memorandum of understandings there, qualification, frequently asked questions, and then the cadre, rotary.org/cadre has its own page with many resources there as well.
Hi, Christian. I see 3 questions on the chat. The first one is, will DRFCs receive a confirmation when they complete the 3 Learning Center courses?
That is a great question. I don't know that they would get something emailed, but if they want to confirm, they can send an email to stewardshipdepartment@rotary.org, and we could let them know, we can confirm that they've actually completed the courses. I would have to check to see if there's actually going to be an email that's generated by the Learning Center or not, because I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. The second question is qualification only for the host and or international partner club?
It's for both. So in order to get a global grant, both parties need to be qualified.
Thank you. And the third question that I see, if a club is only providing funding support, do they have to be qualified?
No, only if you're serving as a sponsor. So each grant would have a host sponsor and an international sponsor. Those parties need to be qualified. If you're just making a contribution, do not need to be qualified. I know
Okay.
I spit out a lot of data quickly. So if questions come up after this, I'm happy to answer them as well via email.
Right, we can forward them too. So if anybody does have a question after this that comes to mind, send them either to myself or to Joanne, and we'll forward them to Christian. What an amazing sessions today and the other 2 days. My goodness. Christian, all the information that you carry around in your head, and Steve, no wonder we have so many questions sometimes that come forward. And we want to just thank you also for all the just being available to us and to share information that we can use for our districts as well. Joanne, do you want to just give a quick thank you, and then I'll finish?
Absolutely. Wonderful again, Christian, always. And I'd like the folks to know that we have very accessible people in Rotary to help us, and ask the question before you get into trouble. That's my biggest piece of advice. But please, thank you again, Steve, Christian, and Brenda, who helped plan this in Christian's absence. So we've got a better sense of what's going on. And again, we're available as assets, and we look forward to communicating with all of you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
So,
Joanne.
good night.
As I said, I had many emails this morning asking about the recordings. They're hot topics.
I know, and they're so
And so we are going to send the recording to each one of you who have registered and who've been on the call, but we're also going to post it on the Zone 28 and 32 website for your access. And I can share that there are clubs that have used those recordings in their actual club meetings. So keep that in mind, because that certainly would be a good PR or professional development session for you. And then special thanks to all of those district leaders and club leaders who've been joining us for these 3 sessions. We appreciate it. Good luck with all the good projects and grants that you're going to be working on. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and good night.